From the nest to having to fly all alone.
Facing the demands of taking out, huge college loans and going into, loan debt.
He went through med school and all he did was study and drink.
Choosing a major can itself be a stressful experience because, they may not really know what they want to go into.
You're being pulled in so many different ways, and it's sort of hard to transition from one to the other.
Going on job interviews, writing an effective resume.
Welcome to Session and Secrets. In today's episode, we are here in session with Ernesto Caravantes. Welcome, Ernesto.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me about yourself, Ernesto.
Well, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, therapist here in California. I work with Stepping Stones Family Counseling, where I work with primarily adults and older adults.
And Ernesto, so there's a lot of going on for college students, from lots of workloads, trying to figure out life, trying to figure out identity, trying to figure out their professional careers and have all their life figured out. What's going on in the lives of college students?
I'm so glad you're asking me about this because this is a subject that's very near and dear to me. I actually wrote my college thesis, my master's thesis, on rates of depression in college students. It's really, I think, something that's worth really delving into. I mean, for example, in 2023, the American College Health Association did a survey of over 55,000 undergraduates all across the United States. They actually found that 79% of these undergraduates had experienced high stress levels within the previous 30 days. 36% had been diagnosed with anxiety, and 28% were diagnosed with depression. 53% had met the criteria for experiencing loneliness, and 31% met the criteria for suicidal ideation. So clearly, this is something that merits a lot of attention. Again, for example, according to data from the American Council on Education, in the 10-year period from 2013, 2014 to 2023, 2024, there were spikes in the levels of anxiety and depression reported by college students. In 2013, 2014, 22% of college students have reported anxiety symptoms. 10 years later, it went from 22% to 34%. And in that same 10-year period, the rates of depression had jumped from 21% to 38%. So clearly, this is something that's worth exploring and to see how we can help create, a healthier environment for college students.
Yeah, so it's definitely increasing, right?
Yes.
And what do you think is happening that anxiety and symptoms of depression and loneliness are becoming more prevalent?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the outward manifestations, the manifest symptoms, if you will, of depression are similar for college-age students as they are for older adults. However, what's unique about college and university students are the factors that contribute to it. For example, they're in a new environment, and some campuses are huge. They can seem very imposing. They might have difficulty finding where their classes are, and where they have to go to from building to building. They're experiencing independence for the first time. This is probably their first time away from home for an extended period of time, especially if they're going to a university out of state or across the country, or even more if they're international students. A lot of them are facing academic pressures. A lot of them are, especially in the sciences, or if they're pre-law or pre-med, they really have to maintain that high, GPA, the grade point average. So a lot of the pressure can stem from that sort of academic sort of standards that they have to uphold. Social shifts. This is also a period of loneliness and difficulty forming new bonds with other students. If they're spending a lot of time on social media, they might experience, what we call FOMO, fear of missing out. And if they see posts of, parties and things, they feel like they're not enjoying the things that their friends are enjoying. Also, they're experiencing financial stress. A lot of them are facing the demands of taking out, huge college loans and going into, loan debt, paying for the tuition, housing, and living expenses. And they're managing all of this, for the first time as far as their financial situation. And also identity and relationships. A lot of students at that point in time, the young adults, they're still in their late teens, early 20s, are experiencing things like forming their sexual identity. They might be experiencing relationship breakups and even safety issues like sexual assault on campus.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on, right? They go maybe from the nest to having to fly all alone, right? And so they're facing a lot of challenges and maybe and transitions and adapting to a new environment, right?
Yes.
And even the education, right? It's different. When we're in high school, it's a very structured and hand-holding, right? There's a lot of hand-holding, and then suddenly you're free. And so sometimes even the freedom can be difficult to manage.
Sure. Choosing a major can itself be a stressful experience because, they may not really know what they want to go into. A lot of students that I've spoken to said they don't know what career they want to end up in. So even just a simple thing like declaring a major it can be very stressful, as it was for me. I remember there was a time when I did not know what I was going to major in. And a friend of mine told me, Ernesto, just pick one and run with it. And I did. I settled in psychology.
I know, me too. I thought I wanted to be an attorney, and then suddenly I was in psychology, and I fell in love with it, and that was the major I wanted to pursue. But what are some of the early signs that we might see in students that are struggling with anxiety or depression?
I think one of the first things that I would probably emphasize is if they are withdrawing from social activities, if they're increasingly self-isolating. If they're withdrawing, if they usually attend games on campus, if they go to frat parties, or if they hang out with their study group and study together, and they're no longer taking part of those activities, that's something that I would look at. And of course, we have, the sort of common symptoms of depression that certainly college students will manifest. For instance, persistent sadness, hopelessness, emptiness. They might have changes in their sleep patterns. They're either sleeping more. They are hypersomniac or insomniac. They are sleeping less than they normally do, or having difficulty going to sleep or staying asleep. They might also experience changes in appetite. They're eating more than they normally do. Maybe food becomes a way of, self-soothing, or they're eating less and they're just losing their appetite for food. They might have a loss of interest in their hobbies. If they're normally engaged in certain hobbies that they enjoy, musical instrument or drawing, then they're no longer doing those kind of things. Fatigue or loss of energy. They're just sort of spending their days just, on the couch or in bed sleeping. That's something to definitely look for. Difficulty concentrating. If they're zoning out in class, or they're zoning out when they should be studying. And isolation, like I mentioned, they're just no longer participating in the activities that they normally do.
Or also it could be like turning away, right? Like turning away from the responsibilities of studying, of going to class, right? We could go the other way of like not caring.
Yes.
Because maybe it's overwhelming and we're trying to focus on partying or drinking or having fun, right? And it's also that balance, right? It's not there.
Exactly. Yeah. And if a student's depressed, they might have deep down, they might have the thought, well, what does any of this matter? Why should I try? How is this going to help my life if I, study trigonometry? They might become sort of nihilistic, because again, they're searching for a sense of identity. They don't really know it. Many of them don't really fully know who they are. Some do, but many others don't. And so they may not have a clear picture or a clear path that they want to forge ahead.
Yeah, I think I was telling you that looking back, right? There was a period of time when I was going to college that I was struggling, and looking back, I was experiencing depression. I was, a lot of changes in my life, and it became overwhelming, and my grades started declining. And I think a professor talked about how he was. And when he was a student, he was struggling emotionally, and how he turned it around, and then was able to get a doctorate and become a professor. And so, and I don't even remember the name of the professor, but it spoke to me, right? That maybe I was struggling, and how I needed to get it together and balance my life better. And at the time, I didn't know about psychology. I don't think I had taken any psychology classes, so therapy was not even a thought in my mind. But now we know better, right? Like there are options, and there are ways that we can help students.
Absolutely.
But sometimes we don't, as adults, or we don't recognize, or even students don't recognize it, that maybe they're that they're experiencing more than just the normal stress, right?
Yeah.
And so it's important to recognize it if you feel like things are becoming overwhelming, right?
Exactly.
And then we see that through actions like what you described, right? A decline in grades, or the opposite, isolation, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I had one client that said he went through med school and all he did was study and drink. And he said it was so stressful. That's all we did. And looking back, he recognized, right? Like he could have had a different experience if he had known that he was struggling with just being anxious, right? Or that he struggled with feeling overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for students that are going through this?
I think one of the first things that I would recommend is that they have the self-awareness and the self-honesty to say, I'm not okay. Now, on some level, of course, life is stressful, no matter what age we're at, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, as I very well know. But I think what's important is to be able to say, okay, how am I navigating these stressors? Have I developed enough resilience and coping skills and coping methods to handle the stresses that life throws at me? Because, once they get out of college, once they graduate from university, they're going to face different sets of challenges, going on job interviews, writing an effective resume, and performing well at their job, and now managing an income and managing their income and expenses. So they might have health problems later, So it's not that the stresses of life stop. They're unique to college students in many ways, but what's important is for them to have those resilience and coping skills and coping techniques.
And what are some of the coping techniques that you would advise or that you would recommend?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that. There are actually quite a few. Some are more evidence-based than others. Some of the top 10 evidence-based coping skills are, for example, deep breathing exercises, making sure that they're, being able to engage in maybe some deep breathing relaxation exercises. Deep breathing stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes relaxation. They can also do mindfulness meditation, being aware of where they're at in the moment, having that self-awareness of mindfulness. And that involves giving your whole attention to the here and now. Mindfulness exercises can, reduce both stress and anxiety. Progressive muscle relaxation, PMR, which entails just gradually tensing and relaxing most of the major muscle groups, which also can promote relaxation. Physical exercise of whatever type that is suitable for them. Some people enjoy more rigorous exercise than others. Sometimes even just going for a walk can be enough to clear one's head. Cognitive restructuring, of course, that's kind of an old standby from cognitive behavioral therapy, which is examining the core thoughts that are giving rise to these emotions. Perhaps they're engaging in catastrophizing or very negative thinking, like I'll never pass this class, or I'll never graduate from college, or I'm never going to be able to find a job after I graduate. And being able to identify those self-defeating thoughts and change them so that they're thinking in more positive ways about life.
Yeah. And sometimes sometimes those maybe those thoughts are fueled by like family expectations, right? Or they're cultural too.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I think that's a really good point. Thinking back to the client that you mentioned, especially if someone's going to go into the super demanding fields like medicine or law or some of the hard sciences, I think is really important first of all, for the student to be choosing that path for themselves, not because their family or social circles are demanding that they do or encouraging them or pushing them to do those things, but that it's something that they naturally want to study. It's got to come from inside. And I think you're right. There's some cultural factors, especially the first generation college students face a lot of pressure. You're the first one in our family to go to college, don't disappoint us, and that can feel also like some pressure. Like they might feel like more is expected of them than the regular male college students because they are the first, So
the first are you trying to figure out how to navigate higher education alone, right? Because no one else in your family did. And so you're trying to figure it all by yourself.
Exactly.
And that can be overwhelming too.
Like here in California, you have to begin to learn about, the different community college systems, the California State Universities, the University of California, and then, of course, the private colleges and universities, religious-based universities, like Azusa Pacific, Biola, as well as college and university that are non-faith-based.
Yeah, so it's a lot of choosing and a lot of decisions, big decisions that you're making, right? But I really like how you said, like, you as a student, you're choosing your career path. Because that's important to find joy in what we're doing, right? Because at the end of the day, we do it for so many hours. And life takes away at least 40 hours, more than that, right? Of our time, that we should be passionate about what we do, and we should enjoy what we do, right? More than dreading, like going and doing a job. We should also do it with heart.
For example, for myself, I really am happy that I chose psychology, because everything that I did after college stemmed from that major. And so I have absolutely no regrets to this day. And I still love studying psychology and learning about its history and the different theories.
Yes, me too. I love it. And so tell me more about, I interrupted you. Tell me more about tools and ways of coping.
Well, no, that's fine. Another thing they can do is to practice journaling. That's something that I regularly recommend to my clients, that they set aside time, usually before bed, so they can kind of empty their minds of either things they want to do the following day, or emotions, or a difficult episode they've experienced, so that they don't go to bed thinking about these things and, keeping themselves awake. And I think it's really important to be able to document. Journaling is basically, you're documenting your life in a structured way, in a specific form and format. And I think that's something that can help students. Social support, spending time with family, with friends, can definitely lower stress and promote emotional well-being. Having good sleep hygiene, making sure that they're not taking in too much caffeine before going to bed, or not exercising too close to bedtime, or that they're not going to bed. I think a lot of us nowadays, and this is something that could not have been anticipated 20 years ago, but I think a lot of us now go to bed and we're, scrolling on our phones, and it can just, cause the time to slip away from us. And before we know, we're going to sleep very late. So having that, good, healthy sleep hygiene, time management. One of the things that I definitely would recommend to students is that they, and this is something available at most college bookstores, is to buy a planner, a small student planner where they can put all their appointments, all the things they need to do. And I think that can help develop the skill of managing their time effectively. And lastly, maybe spending time in nature. This is another of the evidence-based practices, being able to go walk near the beach or through a park. Just being able to reconnect with nature can help.
Yeah, yes, connecting with your senses, right? That's a coping skill. And I love how you talked about doing activities to stay present with yourself, right? Because if you're thinking about all the things you need to do, and the finals and the midterms and the papers, and it's like you leave catching up and thinking, right? Just thinking, and that can feel very overwhelming. And if you stay present and you break it down to one step at a time by organizing your calendar or taking other steps to deal with stress, right? It'll be more manageable.
Yeah. What's important is that, the college years, the university years are, in a sense, a proving ground for a young person. Like we talked about earlier, they're on their own for the first time. They're navigating finances, sleep, time management, being able to put in the appropriate level of studying and work into their classes. So in a sense, it becomes sort of the foundation of skills. And these are the kind of coping skills that they can also take with them throughout life. These coping skills are not necessarily meant to be just for the college years. You can take those later into life, as well as some of those, things like time management and being able to organize one's life effectively.
Yeah, part of developing adulting, right? Part of the adulting, and then having the tools to manage the stress is to come,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly.
Because this is just the beginning.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said it's almost like a proving ground for
Yeah.
how they're going to manage life later.
Yes. And I think also because you maybe at the beginning you're studying so many subjects that
Mhm.
maybe you dislike, right? Like
Mhm.
math or chemistry or
Yeah.
you know, I don't know the ones that I didn't like. But you're being pulled in so many different ways,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's sort of hard to transition from one to the other
Mhm.
to the other to the other. Whereas maybe when we're in our profession, then we get a chance to fully dive into
Sure.
what we like and
Sure.
what we love. But we don't get that chance at the beginning. So I think maybe part of that's why it feels so overwhelming, right?
Yeah. I mean, as a social worker, exactly. I'm one of the things that I am always doing in my careers is finding resources. That's the core of the social work sort of paradigm, which is helping people find the resources that they need. So for college students or students going through their 4 years of university is being able to find the resources that can help them. For example, a campus counseling center. I remember when I went to Cal State Long Beach, I utilized that the campus counseling center and had a few sessions definitely to talk about some things that were on my mind. Utilizing their health insurance to maybe get some therapy outside the campus environment if they want more. Campus counseling can be sort of light, but if they really, I think, want to go into like weekly sessions, and exploring some heavy hitting topics, they may want to consider going into therapy. Lifestyle changes, for example, if they're not getting along with a roommate in their dorm, maybe finding a different living arrangement. Maybe finding ways to save money so they're not always stressed out about money, and so on. And finally, using peer support. And those peers, their friends, are also in a key position to recognize some of those early warning signs that we talked about.
Yeah. And for peers, what would you say? What can they do to help support their friend or college student? Or
I think the best thing that a friend can do in college is to recognize those things like, hey, John, I've noticed you haven't been hanging out with us or studying with us, or I didn't see you at the game last night, or at the frat party, or I didn't see you in class today. You're normally attending class very, very diligently, and I didn't see you. Or you're maybe someone sitting in the back when they usually would sit in the front. The studies have shown that it's usually the more motivated students that sit in the front of the classroom. The less motivated ones would sit in the back. And so just noticing those little differences and a change in behavior, I think is something that their peers and their friends can do. That's, I think, the best thing that a friend can provide is being observant to those kind of changes.
Yeah, it's a notice, right? Let them know that they that you notice their absence, right? That
Exactly.
you notice their changes, and that's a way of showing care, right? And letting them know that they matter to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And how do you think? Because obviously during that decade that they did the research study, like we had COVID,
yes.
right? And so we went into isolation. Students maybe they didn't get a chance to the students that went to college didn't get a chance to have a high school graduation. They didn't have to have their last high school, senior year and do all the activities. So they did have a different experience than maybe what we had. How do you think that impacted them?
I tell my clients all the time that I think that modern psychology is still trying to unravel all of the emotional experiences and the psychological effects of this pandemic that we had, for the starting in 2020. I think that having those kind of now online experience, like a Zoom graduation, or being able to attend, college lectures remotely, may have a certain convenience. Obviously, they can just roll out of bed and attend class, but they're also losing out though on that one-to-one social contact that makes the college or university experience so valuable. I remember when I went to college, what was most valuable to me was really being able to meet people from different walks of life, young people, older people, people from other countries, people from, different states, and just being exposed to that kind of diversity and being able to form bonds with people no matter what their background, no matter what their age, no matter what their ethnicity. And I think that's probably the most valuable thing that a university can provide is those sets of experiences. But if students are now at home and they're just logging in and taking their classes virtually or doing a virtual graduation, that people contact is lost.
Yes. I would have never met one of my best friends if I hadn't been in person.
Yeah.
And she had to turn around to ask my name, right?
Sure.
Because we would have been in a Zoom group and I would have never created that bond that we've had for, decades now.
Yeah.
So yes, the online world did open opportunities for higher education, but at the same time, it sort of promotes separation and loneliness, right?
And sometimes it's difficult to discern, is there a silver lining to this dark cloud, or is there a dark cloud to this silver lining? And so I think there's both benefits and demerits of having that kind of online experience.
Yeah, and I think as a student, you have to see what works for you, right? If you're feeling isolated and depressed and maybe the online classes is not working for you, then maybe next semester try in-person classes or try a combination or even accepting that you have to reduce the number of credits, right? The number of courses you have to take and in order to be more successful, right? Like making adjustments and not trying to meet expectations that are maybe becoming unrealistic.
Yeah.
Or that you're not going to have the best experience, right?
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, it's like you should also enjoy the college experience.
Sure. I see commercials all the time on TV for these, universities that now offer online degree programs, and I think that, quite frankly, the population that perhaps is best suited for those programs are working adults. If you have a working mom with 2 kids and her time is limited and she doesn't have the time to drive 15 miles to a commuter campus or much less live on campus in a dorm, I think those programs can be quite valuable and very convenient for them because they can just log in from home while they're working and raising a family. But I think for a young person, from in the traditional age range of college students, 18 to 22, that could be a different experience. And like you said, they may want to explore whether they want to do a hybrid, perhaps, set up, maybe taking some online classes, but also going, like you said, going on campus for at least some of them.
Yeah. So figuring out what works for you.
What works for you,
right?
Yeah.
And what would you want a college student listening to us today? What would you want them to know if they're feeling overwhelmed or exhausted or like it's too much?
I think a lot of these experiences that we just talked about can cause college students to feel alone, but I would want them to know that they're not alone, that there are people and resources that can help them. There are people that love and care about them, and there are resources that can help them. Like I mentioned, the on-campus counseling centers that they can go to at their college or university, and being, staying in touch with their families, staying in touch with their friends, because sometimes those social contacts can become their lifelines. And if things are really getting to a real boiling point, there are things like the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. All they have to do is call 988, call or text 988, and there's 24/7 help available. But if they're still below that threshold, if it's non-crisis, they can call the National Alliance for Mental Illness, or NAMI helpline. And that's 1-800-950-NAMI, which is the number's 6264. And they provide help Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern time. So there are a lot of resources. There's Amazon has dozens of books on, how to lower stress, anxiety, and depression levels. So if they don't feel like they want to talk to somebody, to at least start with, some self-help books so that they can help, sort of, learn these techniques that we talked about, these coping skills and how to develop resilience.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to share with us?
No, I mean, I think, going back to your question, what would I want a college student to know? The other thing is that this is transitory. No one stays in college forever. Well, I think there's someone in my family that did, but we won't go into that. But the college and university experience is transitory. It's a phase. So yes, it has its demands. It has its definite demands. There's a definite amount of stress that will come with that experience, but that it is transitory. It's it's not going to last forever. So that there is definitely a light at the end of the tunnel, that they can look forward to, and that they're not alone. Like I said, there is hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of transitions, right? And I love what you said, like transitions, they might take some time, but you'll figure it out, right? Sure. And so there's support out there, like you said, and career counseling if you're trying to figure out your career and you don't know what to do. So there's a lot of resources that they can use.
I remember seeing the line of books, the Chicken Soup for the Soul. So they've actually expanded that, and there's one, I kid you not, Chicken Soup for the College Soul. So it's something they can maybe look into as well.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Well, thank you, Ernesto, for everything.
Thank you.
I hope you can join us back.
I would love to. Thank you so much.
Depression in college isn't just about heavy workloads. It's about maintaining your mental health, your physical health, and your emotional health. Thank you for joining us. Please make sure to like, subscribe, or leave a comment down below.